Ladies and gentlemen, RosterWatch Nation, welcome back to the epic RosterWatch Podcast, brought to you by RosterWatch.com. My name is Alex Dunlap, and joining me today, a young man I've been following for quite some time, covering fantasy football, fantasy baseball. His name is Steve Gardner. He's the senior fantasy editor at USA Today Sports. So we got a big timer on here, a big hitter. You follow him on Twitter at Steve A. Gardner. No extra E between the N or the D and the N.
No, or an I.
Like
some people throw an I in there too, but no, as my wife likes to say, no extra letters.
no extra letters here for Steve Gardner. He has going on sale on July 27th, hitting newsstands all over the country. The USA Today Sports Weekly magazine, and that is going to be a fantasy football preview. Do you want to talk about it, kind of what you're doing before we get into it?
Sure. Alex, thanks for having me on too. This is great. It's basically, if you're familiar with Sports Weekly, it's newspaper size, tabloid. I think it's going to be 48 pages, something like that, and it's basically the most up-to-date fantasy football preview publication you can get. We're going to put it to bed on that Thursday before it comes out on the 27th of this month. And it's going to have everything, latest rankings, experts mock drafts, all sorts of strategy articles and capsules for players, rankings, everything. So get your hands on that if you're ready to draft. It's probably a month or so before most people draft, which should give you plenty of time to plan. So watch for it. USA Today Sports Weekly on newsstands, wherever you buy newspapers. So convenience stores, grocery stores, wherever.
Just anywhere. Crazy. And of course, RosterWatch Nation, please mobilize, unite. Give our friend Steve Gardner a follow on Twitter at Steve A. Gardner, so you can be kept up to date with updates regarding that publication and everything else he has going on. One of the things that both of us have going on is we're part of the Scott Fishbowl League. I don't even know how many participants he has in this damn thing these days.
In the thousands, I think.
Yeah, but I don't know where you are. I figured we start out just talking a little bit about Scott Fishbowl. My team, I ended up picking in the 12 hole in my league. And for those who might not know, this is just a big sort of tournament style, early, very sometimes weird rules league.
Yes, indeed.
And it's put together by Scott Fish, who's one of our cohorts over there at the SiriusXM Fantasy Sports channel, and also I believe runs Safe Leagues and some of the other stuff they have going on with the I believe the Fan Hub or it's the League Safe. It's the company that owns all those guys. Is Scott Fish is associated with them, I do believe, and also just an all around great guy in the community, because a lot of what we do for our entry fee into this league is generally some of us will donate to Fantasy Cares, which is a great
yes, indeed,
a great charity that gives toys to kids at Christmas and stuff like that. And it's a really awesome display from the fantasy community. But the settings this year as far as scoring aren't as weird as they were last year, when it was just, what was it? You got a 5-point bonus for 50 yards receiving, or it was video game scoring last year. This year, he's kind of brought it back a little bit, but we do still have some of the things that are very typical Scott Fishbowl. It's super flex. There are lots of flex positions. It is tight end premium, so I believe it's half-point PPR for everybody except tight ends, except tight ends will get full-point PPR.
Yep.
We also get a half point per first down, which is, I'd like to hear kind of what you think about some of these rules, or if there are certain players that you're targeting because of them. And then the other thing is the completion percentage comes into play for quarterbacks. You get, I believe it's half a point per completion, or minus a quarter point per incompletion, or something along those lines. And then there's so you want guys who complete. I believe when I did the math originally, I thought to myself, all right, I think I need a guy with about a 66.6% completion percentage.
Yeah, I think you're right. And this Drew Brees just shoots up in this particular format, which, normally if you're drafting in a normal 12-team mock draft and you wait on quarterbacks, even in a super flex, I think you're waiting for Drew Brees, but he's a borderline first round, second round player in these drafts. In fact, I was in the 10 spot in my draft. So you and I are kind of the same area of the draft grid. He was gone before my second pick. So, I mean, that's kind of where this, it does make quarterback just a super high risk, high reward kind of position, which, again, as you said, this is some weird, wacky rules, and it makes it fun just trying to navigate things and figure out maybe what the strategies are that will work in this particular league as opposed to, your home league.
The more I'm thinking about it, the more I realize that maybe I didn't go about my quarterbacks the right way, because I got a bunch of these things going on. It's hard to put all your brain into every one of these drafts or these best ball leagues. And
how far along are you in your draft?
I picked at 12, so I have my first 4 picks. So in Superflex, generally the strategy that I've liked to take is, if say I'm picking at the end of the round and Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes are gone, which they're going to be. I found that if I wait to the 3-4 turn, I can usually. It's what I did in this draft. I was like, maybe if I wait to the 3-4 turn, I could maybe end up getting like a Matt Ryan, say like a Matt Ryan, Josh Allen combo, and just lock up quarterback. Having gone at the beginning, Derrick Henry and Devontae Adams both fell. It seems like a good strategy to maybe start out with a balance right there between my RB1, my wide receiver 1. And then what happened at the 3-4 turn was there were still some good players left on the board there just because of all the quarterbacks that went. But I saw that Josh Allen was still available. I saw that Daniel Jones was still available. And I said, I'm just going to go ahead and take care of this right now. I feel like both those guys, even with their issues with the completion percentage, should be able to make up for it with any first downs that they could generate through their legs or anything they could. We know what Josh Allen's been able to do the last 2 years as a rushing quarterback. Kind of not as valuable in this league where the completion percentage, both those guys came in as wildly erratic quarterbacks that were evaluated in a lot the same way, man. Like both those guys were really, my co-host Byron, he called it, he said it was egregious what the fantasy community and what the scouting community was saying about Josh Allen in particular. Just the fact that he was buried before he ever even got started, right? And he's been a much better fantasy asset than even we ever thought. But maybe for this kind of format, he's some of the issues that people had with him, his particular the accuracy and the erratic arm, maybe does bring him down a little bit in this format to some of the levels that people had talked about then. So that's how I started. I'm only 4 picks in. And you know what, man, as I'm looking to probably what's going to happen to me here at the 5,
you're going to be on the clock while we're talking, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, I don't think so. But I think I'm about 7 picks out, but I can already tell there going to be some players here left. Like what if David Johnson's still on the board? It looks like he might still be on the board. There's some interesting players that I wouldn't have thought were going to be able to stick around. How about you? How did you get your start? What do you think of your squad?
I was drafting from the number 10 spot. I took Michael Thomas in the first round. He was there, and number 1 consensus wide receiver. I went ahead and figured I would take the value where it came. Took Dak Prescott in round 2 to get my elite quarterback in this format. A couple of running backs. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was there in the 3rd round. Leonard Fournette was there in the 4th round. And I think the one where people may just say, what the heck are you thinking? We're through 6 rounds. So I have my 5th round pick. I took Ryan Tannehill because there were so many quarterbacks off the board. There were, 15 already off the board by this point in round 5. And we have a phone call here. We may have another draft pick signed. Hang on a second. No, but I took Tannehill, and, great completion percentage last year. Also runs the ball. Rushing touchdowns are huge. And I liked it even more because A.J. Brown was still available in the 6th round. And I think that's what, if you're watching this and you're in the Scott Fish Bowl, wide receivers are just plummeting. Even the great ones I'm just amazed at the value you can get in the later rounds, because I think everybody is pushing them down and down their draft boards, and some great values are coming.
Scott Fishbowl, a big tournament style kind of game. You play within your own league, and you play for bragging rights within the own league, and then the division and the conference. But at the end of this thing, a champion is crowned, and being able to pair Ryan Tannehill, we talk about all the time. We talk about stacking in DFS. We talk about stacking in best ball. It's something that it's become part of the well-known lexicon of how you play, right, in those formats. But a format people will talk. You can stack and redraft whenever it's a sort of a tournament style format like this. It's kind of go big or go home. You kind of like to have that connection there. And you started out with, to be able to get. So that's the LSU running back team, huh? So Clyde.
Yeah, that's right. That's a great point. It used to be Georgia running backs were the key, but now LSU.
Right. So with Clyde, how comfortable are you in a rookie running back coming into now? On one hand, we have the Andy Reid system. We have the Andy Reid corollary, which he produces RB1 after RB1 after RB1. He's talked about this guy being better than Brian Westbrook. Brent Veach said he's better than Brian Westbrook. That's how we see him. It's not just lip service. They've showed us how they felt by taking him in the first round with their first available pick in this draft. He was the guy that Patrick Mahomes wanted. He got 55 footballs last year on one of the best college offenses we've ever seen. He is small. He's diminutive. He's not probably going to have as much time in an offseason. He's not going to have as much time in an offseason program to be able to learn the offense, to be able to learn how to pass protect. How you take the obvious pros where you're like, holy cow, I could have the primary runner in this offense. That's going to be the most prolific offense in the league, but he's a rookie. Damian Williams is still there. How do you weigh it all out?
Well, I think from an upside standpoint, Edwards-Helaire is fabulous. The best possible scenario, and we were saying this on draft night even, where could you want otherwise? It was the perfect position for him. And he doesn't really have to do a whole lot because the Chiefs offense is such a big play offense. And, you get a couple of big, chunk plays down the field, touchdowns. They're going to score so many of those. He's wide open to be able to make great strides in his rookie season. He's a little bit bigger even than Brian Westbrook. So I think that's even a plus for him. Damian Williams is still going to get certainly his share of carries and touches in that backfield. Maybe it's a possibility. I think Damian Williams is still on the board for me later on in this draft. So pairing them up, you could start both of those and not really worry too much and still get plenty of value. So I think that they are going to coexist just fine in that Kansas City Chiefs backfield. And again, if we're talking about, winning your particular home league, maybe it's a risky pick, but for something like this, where there's an overall competition, you want those guys that are high upside, and certainly he has a huge ceiling.
Yeah, you're shooting for the moon with him. The ceiling, and then if we just think about it, that's like you bring it up. Sometimes I think to myself more, not in a league like this, but maybe if I'm just thinking to myself, like you mentioned, in our home leagues, what's the worst case scenario? And I think that the worst case scenario, given everything, is probably him having like a Miles Sanders type of season, to where it's like at the beginning of the season, he doesn't necessarily help you that much. And maybe by the end of the season, when he's really kicking ass, you could be out of it because he was giving you, bad production at the very beginning. But I think that's probably the worst that I can imagine, given, they spent a first round pick on a guy that's very, very talented. It seems to tailor-made for exactly what they want to do. So it's sometimes you just gotta sack up and make the pick, man, that you think can go big. So I definitely like it. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you is just sort of your level of confidence in certain running backs. And maybe we can just go to that, since you mentioned Leonard Fournette. Let's just say like on a 1 to 10 scale, your level of trust in these guys. where are so you picked Leonard Fournette? Does that necessarily mean that you trust him? Can we really expect now that they've brought in Chris Thompson, they've brought in Laviska Shenault, who's a rookie that showed during his time in college he could take over football games playing everywhere. He could play out of the backfield, he could play at tight end, he could play out wide at the wide receiver position. Is it possible that Leonard Fournette is going to be able to rack up another 100-target season? Does he need another 100-target season to be able to be effective? If we see a little bit of the positive touchdown regression, what do you think? Where are you on Leonard Fournette? 1 to 10 scale. How much do you trust him?
I kind of trust. I would say 8 out of 10. I mean, he's obviously the back there. He's going to start. He's going to get the goal line carries, that sort of thing. And you're right. You make a great point, especially, with Chris Thompson and everything else that the Jaguars have done this offseason. Probably not going to get that 100 targets again. So, I'm okay with that. I understand that. But still, with in our draft, the 16th running back off the board, I'm certainly okay with that. And, I don't see how the Jaguars have a much worse offense than they've shown the last couple of years. So maybe some stability there. Fournette is going to be there. You got to worry a little bit maybe about some injury history, but otherwise, I mean, he's clearly the best back that they have there. And you don't have too many of those, without a doubt, non-committee running backs in the NFL. And to get him where I did, I think, I've got to be pretty happy with that. And in terms of confidence, I think Fournette is going to get a ton of touches this year.
Yeah, he's in a contract year. Even if they don't like him that much, and they were looking to trade him,
run him into the ground.
Yeah, it's just like give Leonard the run. And I asked Doug Marrone at the combine whenever we had the podium availabilities. I was just like, is it like, how is it possible? I believe he only scored three touchdowns last. I was like, how did it like? Are we going to see that bounce back? Three touchdowns last season. I was like, are we going to see was that just bad luck? And he's like, man, our whole team had bad luck. Our whole team needed to score more touchdowns. Yeah. If we get going what we want to get going next year, Leonard's going to score a lot more touchdowns. All these guys are going to score a lot more touchdowns because we didn't score enough touchdowns last year. So that'll be interesting to see and interesting to follow. I'm not sure I'm quite at 8 with him, but I think that the industry consensus is a good bit lower than that. And I think I'm somewhere between you and industry. I'm higher than industry consensus, maybe not quite to an 8. What about, let's see, some of these other guys that people have a little bit of worry about? What about James Conner? Where can you be with him? Another guy whose contract's going to be headed for free agency. They did draft Anthony McLaurin, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who is another one of these sort of smaller, maybe scat back types, sort of a 1B satellite back that over the course of a few games could maybe handle the load, but I have trouble thinking he could do it for the whole season. I feel the same way about Jalen Samuels, who's also there in tow. They took Benny Snell last year, who had a bad athletic profile, but maybe profiles a little bit more as a guy who could step up and shoulder more of a load just because of his size, if anything happened to James Conner. But we hear Mike Tomlin talk about the fact that, Conner's the guy. Tomlin over the course of going back to even the times whenever Le'Veon Bell would get hurt and they'd have to go to D'Angelo Williams. There's just always been one steady producer there. Feels like people are kind of sleeping on James Conner. He's available pretty late in these drafts, Steve. What's your level of confidence there with him?
Yeah, I think 6.5 or 7. I mean, you're going to have Ben Roethlisberger back for a full season too, and that makes a difference in the offense. He's certainly better than Mason Rudolph as your quarterback, so that opens things up. You got the wide receiving core, pretty solid. So yeah, I think James Conner has a really high ceiling, and we've seen what a running back can do, especially a guy that catches passes out of the backfield there when Le'Veon Bell was there. Conner has shown flashes of that. The problem with him is just, the injury history and staying healthy. If he can stay on the field, I think you've got a potential steal if you can get him, later in the draft in that, 4th, 5th round kind of area. Yeah. I think while my confidence level may not be that high of him staying healthy, I think certainly the upside is worth taking that gamble.
Well, you bring up a good point. Health is probably the most important thing. right? That's probably that's probably the thing I should have led with whenever we talk about why people worry about it. Like, it's the health. It's really bad. I know our friends over at Player Profiler have the health, like the injury rating system. And I believe, I don't want to, you guys can go check this or check me on this. I believe James Conner was the biggest risk that their algorithm was able to identify for the
sense.
So a kind of a sneaky health risk there whenever everybody else is worried about guys like, the Todd Gurley's or the David Johnsons. James Conner falls right there in that class. So speaking of David Johnson, what about David Johnson? So Bill O'Brien sends away DeAndre Hopkins. It feels like that dude is gonna have to at least. I mean, whatever. What's the one trying to think of? He's gonna have to justify that.
Sure.
That by getting David Johnson involved somehow. And David Johnson to start last season was actually pretty good before he had a couple of separate injuries. You think he could be like the David Johnson that he was to start last season, or could he be? I doubt he has another 2016 in him. But could he be at least maybe like the David Johnson we started to see last season, where I don't have his game log. I don't have his game. Let's just see if I can look at his game log from the beginning of last season. It's just hard because he's not even in these top 20 running backs over the course. So last year he started off the season, Detroit. He had a 25.7 pointer in PPR in that game at Baltimore, which was a brutal matchup, an 8.4 pointer. Carolina, 18.5 points. Seattle, 21.9. Cincy, 18.6. Atlanta, 28.2. And he had 6 catches in that game. After that, we all know what happened. It was a back injury, a separate other injury. Kenyon Drake comes along. Cliff Kingsbury says, why the hell would I even put anybody back in when Kenyon Drake's scoring 4 touchdowns a game?
Right.
What do we make of David Johnson?
Yeah.
He's getting older.
That's the thing, too. The first thing that popped into my mind when you said David Johnson is that, we have to worry about the shelf life of running backs, and especially in the NFL. David Johnson's going to be, age 28. That's his where he is on the continuum. That's pretty old for a running back, and but still, you have a guy who can catch passes out of the backfield. Perhaps even just a couple of years ago, was the best catching passes out of the backfield, and why an offense wouldn't utilize those skills is beyond me. But I think they will in Houston, and I think they're going to have to justify a lot of the offseason moves. No more DeAndre Hopkins, which is huge. So somebody's got to be the focal point of that offense. And Deshaun Watson is going to not only hand the ball off to David Johnson, he's going to look for him out of the backfield. So I think in terms of confidence, again, health is huge, but I feel in terms of his role, I think he has game-breaking ability here, and he's getting pushed down some because of all those questions. I may put him up in the same category up there with Leonard Fournette, to tell you the truth. I think there's plenty left in the tank for David Johnson. Extended period of inactivity, helping him get back to close to 100%. I'm probably going to have a few shares of David Johnson this year.
You ever had back problems, Steve?
No, I have not. Thankfully,
they're bad, man. Like I don't see how you could play football with some kind of problem with your disc. It makes your whole body feel like it doesn't work. It's just crazy. So if he's over it, I mean, yeah, man, I'm in. I'm fine, especially given the current price. What about another guy with this injury issue that sounds just a painful one, a hip? Chris Carson. Is injury what we're worried about at the forefront here? Because he kind of, people have really different opinions about him. Rashad Penny's looking like he's actually probably having a little bit harder time coming back off his injury than Chris Carson is. At least that's sort of the reporting that we're getting. There's some reporting that Rashad Penny is going to have to start the season on PUP. Now, Chris Carson on a contract year, just signed a new deal with his new agency, Octagon. Our good friend Murphy McGuire, shout out to Murphy. That's a great signing from him. I've been told by some of those guys, he's going to 100% be ready to go for the season. They're not worried about it at all. Chris Carson right now going at basically overall pick number 31. So in half point PPR. So we're talking about running back 16 or so. He's going before guys like, Le'Veon Bell and Melvin Gordon, though. Where are you on Chris Carson for his current price, given everything that we know? And let's just say that we think, as far as Rashad Penny, we just don't know right now. So we just kind of bake into the idea that that's just a nebulous situation that could go one way or the other.
Well, I'll tell you, the fact that the Seahawks just love to run the football, and probably one of the highest percentages run versus pass in the NFL, you have to think that Chris Carson is going to have some significant value. And, they love to give the ball to him on the goal line. I think there are going to be a lot of, 1 and 2 yard touchdown runs for him. So that's a plus. I'm looking at the Fishbowl draft again. He was running back 21. So, yeah, he was going right around in that Melvin Gordon, David Johnson range.
It's funny, and that's just funny. That goes to show something that I've felt. And I don't mean to cut you off, but it's just in the Scott Fishbowl, it's educated people, it's half analysts, it's half just crazy fans who are just really into this stuff. Mm-hmm. And the people who are crazy about fantasy, I was surprised to see he was running back 16. I figured he would be lower because in my echo chamber, it feels like people are a little bit down on him. And these mock drafts that are happening, then the ADPs are happening for casual drafts, he's going a little bit higher. But it does seem like maybe the industry is just a little bit down on him if he's going 21 in a Fishbowl draft.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, Alex, is that there's so much excitement over rookie running backs. And we see this every year, not only in football, but in other sports too. When guys come in and are the new kid on the block, the prospects get a chance. People like to say, I want a share of him. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, wonderful upside, but he hasn't proven anything in the NFL. But again, the bandwagon's super fast to get everybody on board. And I think Chris Carson is one of those really boring veterans that tend to fall down drafts. And, you can pluck them off for what seems like a pretty good value. And again, the Seahawks love to run the ball. And if Chris Carson is in as good a shape as we're hearing, then I think he's a huge potential value.
Chris Carson, over the course of the last 2 seasons, he's gotten you 25 plus points. And this is counterintuitive. He's gotten you 25 plus points in PPR 16.67% of the time. That's better than Joe Mixon. That's better than Nick Chubb. Mm-hmm. That's
borderline first rounders, right?
In PPR, it's weird because you think about James White as such a PPR maven that has these big spike weeks. It's much better than James White. It's better than David Johnson. It's better than Josh Jacobs has only gotten you a 25-pointer in PPR in his career. In his short career, 7.69% of the time. Like Chris Carson's done it over double what Josh Jacobs has. And like, as you mentioned earlier with Mixon and Chubb, those are guys going in completely different stratospheres of these as far as early ADP. So what is it? So I'm not going to let you get away without pinning a 1 through 10 confidence level though.
I'd say 7-ish, somewhere in there.
Okay, so a 7 for him, and then finally the confidence level, and then I got to ask you about some Redskins after this before I let you get out of here. I mean, I feel like I'm keeping you long, but I got to ask you about Le'Veon Bell. The offensive line has improved. Sam Darnold hopefully won't have mono again.
Yeah.
A bunch of good new weapons. Denzel Mims as a rookie. They brought in Rashad Perriman. Chris Herndon should come into the season healthy. Darnold another year in an admittedly bad system. Could it be that people are forgetting that Le'Veon Bell, has the opportunity to be one of these, kind of like Fournette you talked about. You don't love clicking it, but he's one of these guys he's one of the true guys that's set to be a true workhorse and 3-down back. What's your confidence level on Le'Veon Bell coming into his second year with the New York Jets?
All right, Bell is at the bottom of the list of these guys that we've discussed. I put him at 5.5 or 6, and the reason, it's not that I don't like Le'Veon Bell as a player. I just am not a fan of the Jets, Adam Gase. The offense in general
offense sucks. It's
just so unimaginative. And
Yeah.
I mean, when they had nobody to get the ball to last year, they still couldn't get Le'Veon Bell more than 2 yards in the middle of the offensive line. So I'm just all out, and sorry, Jets fans, but I don't have the most optimistic view of what's in store for your team and your star running back this year.
Well, what those Jets fans should be applauding you and saying, hopefully he's right, so we can lose this year and get this joker out, man. That's what you need to do. Sometimes you need to just pull off the Band-Aid, like the Adam Gase is the Band-Aid. You need to rip it off.
Darnold can be good. That's the one thing. I mean, I see some glimpses sometimes and say, if he had a different system or was put in a better position, and maybe offensive line upgrades will help that. But still, it just seems like he's set up to fail. And that's kind of sad for a guy that you're kind of rooting for.
Right. Okay. So you are from the Virginia area. You fell in love with the game of football watching the Washington Redskins on those Monday night games on the couch, and I'm sure getting to follow that team as far as the regional coverage and stuff like that. So I got to ask you some Redskins stuff, especially about one of my. It's funny, they have two of my favorite young prospects in the entire league on their team. That one is a rookie in Antonio Gibson who hasn't seen the NFL field yet. The other is Derrius, Guice, who's seen an NFL field, but every time he does, he breaks something. When he's, it's either whenever he breaks it, it's either a bone or it's a ligament or it's a huge run or a huge screen pass. I mean, geez, man, I remember his rookie preseason, as he was getting up to speed in the game where he tore his ACL. I was like, Here he is. It's the truth, man. We're going to get to see it. And then he gets a little bit healthy. He gets like 50 touches in the next season before he gets hurt again. Looks absolutely dynamic. It doesn't look like he's lost a step. I mean, whenever he came out in that same class as Saquon Barkley, we didn't say Saquon. We didn't have him ranked ahead of Saquon Barkley, but what we did say is if you're just looking at a guy who's a true savant as far as a between the tackles runner,
right?
He's better between the tackles than Saquon Barkley. I don't think anybody with a scouting mind would say differently with how much Saquon Barkley always bounced it out to the outside at Penn State and stuff. He could make up for it with his ridiculous athleticism, his pass catching ability. What people forget about Derrius Guice is, man, I was down there in San Antonio for the practices for his Army All-American game, where people forget that back in high school, coming out of high school, Derrius Guice was he was considered the number one all-purpose back in the nation, I think. Either the number one or number two, but he was an all-purpose back. And in that game, go look at the highlights. He scored 2 long touchdowns, lining up as a slot wide receiver, making these athletic, circus catches. So he can catch the football too. He's got like literally everything. But then you look at the depth chart. Adrian Peterson's there. But I think Bryce Love is still on the roster. Yeah. They brought in Peyton Barber. And now they have Antonio Gibson, who's going to be playing some kind of role. He could play a little bit more of a receiver as a running back. How can Derrius Guice break out? Can he?
I always like to think that talent works its way to the top. And, as you were talking, watching the Redskins and when they drafted him and thinking, Trent Williams opening holes for Derrius Guice and all the possibilities and how things just went so completely wrong as they seem to be doing for the Redskins for the last couple of years. But no, all he's got to, 3 knee injuries already in his career. I think that's the one thing that we just can't go far out enough on that limb with Derrius Guice to say, I'm all in, despite all the talent that he's shown and everything that we've seen out of him when he's been healthy. I think just the cumulative effect of all of those knee injuries has to be playing on him to some degree, and that's what makes it difficult. So, yes, if you can get him, obviously, in the later rounds and not have to rely on him and maybe just sort of enjoy the rewards as the season progresses, I think that's the best way to deploy him. And again, as you said, such a talent, and the rest of the roster too is a concern. But when he is head and shoulders above everybody else, when you put the football in his hands out of the backfield, you got to respect that.
So just let me ask you this about Guice. So when we talk about if we talk about where you got to take him, are you at least interested in the idea of Derrius Guice somewhere around? Because it's basically, I think with Guice, you probably, to be able to get him, you might need to consider him in the tier with guys like Kareem Hunt and the rookies like DeAndre Swift and Cam Akers. That's generally where you're going to be wanting to pull the trigger on a guy like him, maybe mid to late seventh in half point PPR leagues where you only use one quarterback. Mm-hmm. Do you like him there, or is he going to need to fall more into the eighth or later, where you're looking at more like guys like, Sony Michel and Marlon Mack, who now has, Jonathan Taylor coming in, and, Kerryon Johnson, who has Swift coming in, and Damian Williams, who has CEH coming in. It's like, that seems like the next, does he belong at the top of that tier? Or do you have him up there with the kind of the Kareem Hunts and the DeAndre Swifts of the world? Is he somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, I don't think I put him as high as those, Swift and those guys, the rookies that are coming in and taking those starting jobs. But you mentioned Damian Williams again. I think, right in that particular area, and I would put Williams at the top of those guys that you listed.
Okay, but it's completely out on Marlon Mack. Are you out?
I think so. I mean, he's had an awful lot of opportunity and has been okay, but I think the Colts, are going to go in a different direction, and that's part of it.
Yeah. I mean, they drafted Taylor. Yeah. Okay. So and then all right. So back to the Redskins, and I appreciate you going a little bit overtime here, Steve.
Sure.
We got a big hitter on the pod, man. Want to get all the insight we can for the good people. Let's talk about. I mentioned Antonio Gibson briefly. My opinion is that's a really crowded running back room. But like you said, I agree with you that the cream rises to the top. Antonio Gibson's awesome. I mean, getting to watch him for a week at the Senior Bowl, we were just tweeting, why is nobody talking about this guy? We couldn't believe it. Then he goes to the combine and runs a 4.38, and it was just a victory laps all over here for us. So we're little bit sad to see him go to a team like the Redskins that has another guy like Guice that we love so much, and it feels like any touches he gets might kind of lead to a squeeze for Guice. But
let me ask you this, Alex: do you think Antonio Gibson could play out wide? Do you think that is a possible role for him that would increase his value?
Yeah, well, out of the slot, I don't think they would play him. I don't think they would play him out
in
wide.
The slot.
He has small hands. I think he's 8 3/8 inch hands. So I think they would just want to, and just how they used him in Memphis. You just look at, I mean, it looks like Tony Pollard. He's big. He's super fast. He catches everything. He scored a touchdown like once every 7 or 8 times. He touched the football. I mean, he was just a big play waiting to happen, but just such a weird kind of player with the way that he kind of reminded you of like how Jalen Samuels was used. Remember at NC State, they didn't use him much, but he was big and he could catch the football out of the backfield. So I do think that they can line him up out of the slot. And I think that's maybe. Yeah. I mean, do you think? I mean, it makes sense.
Here's the thing.
A way to get 2 really good guys on the field. I'd love seeing.
I remember for that brief little time when Chris Thompson was the back to own in Washington and was getting so many touches and doing so many good things as that third down receiving back, to where, people were starting him in 12-team leagues in the flex position. I think Gibson has that kind of ceiling, and you could put him in there and put Guice in the backfield and have all sorts of really creative things that you could do with that offense. So I think that's while, as you mentioned, the backfield is just so crowded, the Redskins receiving core is very thin. And you could certainly mix, his roles in receiving and rushing and get a valuable back. I don't think he really needs to be drafted in most regular size leagues. But a couple weeks in, if you see the usage, might be able to jump on him as a free agent pickup and hit the jackpot there.
Well, another one of our it's funny, the Redskins have so many of our favorite prospects from recent Senior Bowls. Terry McLaurin was, besides Deebo Samuel, not this year but the year before. I mean, it was the Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel Senior Bowl 2 years ago, and outside of McLaurin, because I want to end with a question about him, but outside of him, are you looking to? I mean, is there any interest in Steven Sims? We've heard a lot about him. Or, I mean, do you have any interest in Kelvin Harmon? Maybe we're talking more probably 14-team league guys at this point. But is there anything you've seen out of those guys to make you think that one of them could possibly take another step up? As I guess it all kind of depends on whether Dwayne Haskins can get it together and be the quarterback that they hope. But do you lean one way if you're not looking McLaurin? Is there an ancillary receiving option that we could even prospect with?
Yeah, I think you're going to have to dig deep. Have to have that sort of a league where you get to the level where Steven Sims is going to be, just because it's easy to overlook him. But the one thing, I go back to the end of last season, when Haskins was in there and starting, he had 4 touchdown catches in the last 4 games, and he was a nice a component. What am I looking for? Compliment.
Yeah.
For Terry McLaurin, to where the other teams couldn't just say we're focusing on one side of the field, and Sims was competent there. And so I think of the two, the younger guys that you mentioned, Sims seems to be more attractive to me. And again, the Redskins have nothing at tight end. So you're going to have to throw, if you're throwing the ball down the field, you're going to have to look for the guys out wide or somebody in the slot or coming out of the backfield. So I think there's definite potential for some production there, but you certainly don't have to pay up for that on draft day.
All right. So Steve Gardner of USA Today, the senior fantasy editor there. Steve, just go ahead and let them know real quick before I get to this McLaurin question to close us out. Just hit them one more time. Where they can find you, what it is that you're doing.
Sure. Follow me on Twitter. I'm at Steve A. Gardner, Gardner. And you can ask me football, baseball, whatever. I'm open for any kind of discussion. And we have as I mentioned at the top of the program, we have a publication, USA Today Sports Weekly, that's going to have a preseason fantasy football preview that's coming out on July 27th. So check that out. It's going to have all the latest information, mock drafts and projections and everything else that you need to get ready for your fantasy football draft. So look for that, USA Today Sports Weekly, on newsstands July 27th.
Okay, so you're sitting in a fantasy football draft room. You've got your 3 starting running backs. You got your 2 starting wide receivers, and the running backs have gone off the board. You have it now where you're clearly going to be going wide receiver, and the 2 best available are Terry McLaurin and djchark. Which of those buttons are you pushing?
All day, Terry McLaurin. No question in my mind. I every time I watched him, and I got to watch most of the Redskins games last year, he's just amazing to watch. I mean, it's almost like he can't be covered sometimes, and I really love that. So when the ball is up there, he's going to go get it. Chark is fine, and I think both of those guys, it's going to depend a lot on whether their quarterback can get them the ball in good position. But in terms of if it's anywhere close, I think McLaurin's going to catch it. So I'm with him all day long.
All right.